Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fresh Concrete. This is the first of this year's Fresh Concrete events, which is produced in collaboration between the Concrete Centre and the Building Centre. My name is Elaine Toogood. I'm Director of Architecture and Sustainable Design at the Concrete Centre, and I'm going to be hosting today's event and introducing you in just a minute to today's speaker. So in case you're not aware, Fresh Concrete is an online series that has been created to share just some of the huge, wide range of innovative practices and new types of concrete that are emerging to address climate change. So these are technologies, ways of manufacturing, ways of using concrete that bring a fresh approach and a fresh thinking to the ways in which we can make and use concrete. Now, the recordings from last year's series are now all available online. I mentioned that this is this year's series. So we ran a series last year called Fresh Concrete 2022. And through these two links that are on the screen now, you can have a look at 8 recordings. Some really interesting and thought-provoking innovation about the manufacture use of concrete in construction, including carbon capture concrete, graphene-enhanced concrete, structural design to be de- and reassembled, self-healing concrete, and even concrete that can help passively charge vehicles that drive over it, as well as 3D printing. So if you haven't had a look at these before, please, I urge you to take a look. There's some really interesting stuff there. So now to today's event. This is another example of a different approach to the manufacture and use of concrete, and it's entitled Shaping Better Places, Creating Habitats for Biodiversity Using Concrete. And I'm absolutely delighted that I'm going to be joined by Nigel George. He's Director of Artecology, and he'll be talking to you directly from Artecology's workshop on the Isle of Wight. And there he's going to be able to explain their approach towards collaboration with local communities to enhance the beauty and biodiversity of artificial coastal structures, river flood defences, and some inner city spaces. And he's going to be giving you a hands-on demonstration to some of their range of handcrafted and eco-engineered concrete products. Now, there should be time for Nigel to respond to questions during this or after his session. So as we go along, please do submit your questions via the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. Now, if we don't manage to get through all of those questions in this session, and there are quite a few people online, so we may not, then we will share that list with Nigel afterwards to respond to you directly. Now, if you don't want to have a follow-up answer, then ask your question anonymously, or please just let us know that when you ask your questions. But hopefully we'll be able to get round to a good number of those questions. So before I introduce Nigel, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context, and I thought it was worth sharing some other examples of work with concrete related to this topic. And it does seem that in recent years, there's been a really increased interest in using concrete within the marine environment to encourage life, whether it's in the form of artificial reefs and breakwaters, or better solutions for other marine infrastructure that's permanently submerged under the water. There's lots of international and more local examples as well, and there's just a few of them on the screen. Or also for structures such as vertical seawalls and flood defences that are intermittently submerged with the rising and falling tide. And I know we're going to hear a lot about this later on. These are some of the examples I'm showing here. Use a range of casting techniques, whether it's precast or cast in situ, mass manufactured or otherwise. And I know, as you can see, a common feature within all of these is texture, and I know that's what we're going to hear a lot about today. And that's one of the benefits of using concrete, of course, is its ability to be able to create really bespoke and beautiful different types of textures. But it's not just in a marine environment or underwater. There are new ways of making and using concrete to encourage plant growth and habitats for insects on dry land as well. And there are some illustrated in this Concrete Centre publication, which you can download. It was produced a couple of years ago. It includes things like the bioreceptive wall panels that you can see here, and some other bee bricks and things like that. So it's a really interesting work, and there's many more innovations coming through looking at creating and using concrete in a different way. It doesn't need to be flat. Why should it be flat? Maybe there's other things that we can do with it to provide both durability and long-lasting structures, but also maybe to make them a bit more interesting, look good, and also do some work to enhance the nature around us and support green infrastructure in that way as well. So I mentioned the walls above ground. We've got the Poi Keelohydric living walls by Professor Marcus Cruz that are featured in that article that I was just talking about. You may have seen some of this work on the Concrete Centre's Stand at Future Build in previous years. But I wanted I was pleased to say that we also, this year, we featured at Future Build. Our exhibit included some of Artecology's nature bricks, which is really my segue to bringing us through to talk about the event today. And so we're absolutely delighted to welcome Nigel and Artecology to give this presentation. This being, of course, their 10th anniversary year, as I understand it, of having their vertipools in place on the Isle of Wight. So it seems an appropriate time to help you celebrate that, Nigel. And over to you if you'd like to switch on your camera and your mic. Excellent. So over to you, Nigel, to give us I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can see you and hopefully hear you loud and clear. Do you want to say hello?
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine, very
Excellent.
much.
Welcome. So over to you.
Good. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for that, and thanks for inviting me to, take part in your lunchtime seminar. It's really, really nice of you to invite us. I'm Nigel George, and I've been working with cementitious materials I've worked out about 32 years. That's quite a long time. It started when I was working in zoology, making props for animals in captivity at that time, inspired in many ways by two things really. In the very early 1990s, some of you won't be old enough to remember a television program called Pebble Mill at 1, and I happened to be watching one day that television program and saw a man stuffing his wife's tights with cement and newspaper, sort of mashed up together to make ponds. And it was like an amazing light bulb went off in my mind as to what could be done using that technique. And together with an interest in the Victorian landscapers, the James Bullerman son, who made fantastic rock landscapes from cementitious materials, I embarked on this journey of working with different types of concretes to create naturalistic habitats for animals in captivity. So zooming forward to Artecology, which is the department that is taking care of the eco-engineering for a slightly larger company, although still a small company, called Arc Biodiversity and Climate. So I head up the Artecology department, and here we make objects, not just out of concrete, but a lot of the work that we do is based in concrete, and we are essentially an R&D department, and we, as I say, we make all sorts of things. And so you can see some of these objects that are dotted around on the workbench, because here we are in my studio, in the Artecology studio on the Isle of Wight, which is a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve. So we're very lucky, our situation, we're right by the beach. We've got places here that we can trial objects. We've been given permissions to do that. And I think if it wasn't for us being here on the Isle of Wight, in this particular place in Sandown Bay, we probably wouldn't have got started, I don't think. I think what we are probably be best known for is our vertipools, and that started really 11 years ago when one of my colleagues, who's an ecologist, and myself as a creative practitioner and artist kind of got together because Ian, the ecologist, said to me, "Nigel, I've got this idea about creating vertical intertidal habitat on sea defences." He he was thinking about climate change, he was thinking about sea level rise, and how this intertidal zone that is going backwards and forwards twice a day, that this rich habitat that is in, when the tide goes out, is incredibly important. And that as we see sea level rise over the coming years, that wherever there are defended coastlines, and as we see sea levels rise, we're going to see more and more defended coastlines around our urban coasts, that this would get shorter and shorter over time, and eventually it would be going up and down the sea wall. And that presented a huge problem, because there is the loss of this enormously important habitat. And Ian's question to me, so this is an ecologist talking to an artist really, Nigel got this idea, how could we create a facsimile of that habitat in the vertical plane, so that when the tide is going up and down, and no longer in and out, there's places and spaces for wildlife to make its home. And to me, there was a sculptural solution. The second he said it, I kind of knew what the project was. And I've got this little camera so that I can show you some things close up, because some of these things are quite small. And if I hold this up just over here, hopefully you can see this. This is one of the original models that I made out of air drying clay. And this was what led to the Vertipool project. It's very simple. It's got a stem. It's a bit like a urinal, really, isn't it? I mean, or let's say it's a bit like a bathroom sink. It has a kind of pedestal. I made it have a bow shape so that it could split energy of water as it's coming in, as waves are coming in. And then I sort of developed it on a little bit further and started to bring some more pattern, texture and form into this thing. Now, obviously these are tiny models. We ended up making quite a big structure, about nearly a metre across the back, with a big triangle and a basin in the top, just as you've seen in those little maquettes, those little models. And we were very lucky to get permissions from our local coastal engineer. So this is the Isle of Wight Council's coastal engineer, gave us permissions to trial these things. This is back in 2013. And we put 5 out on a seawall in a place called Baldner. And that was kind of it. They sat there. Shortly after that, we were contacted by Bournemouth University, and they were interested enough to have a PhD student, now Dr. Alice Hall, monitor those vertipools for a couple of years. And what we discovered was that they work. And Ian's original question was kind of answered. Yes, it is possible to create rocky shore habitat on concrete sea defences. The data came in and it was quite extraordinary. They were populated sometimes, in some cases, they actually had more biodiversity and bioabundance than the actual rock pools on the beach. So that was something none of us had expected, and it kind of rocketed us into this arena of eco-engineering. When I'm not an engineer, neither is Ian, he's an ecologist. As I say, I'm a creative practitioner, an artist with a background in zoology. But amongst the team here, we've got this wonderful cross-discipline approach that does engage with engineers and fabricators. And we found that by bringing this cross-discipline approach of art and science, jamming them together, creating, it's the names, as it says, Artecology, we were able to solve problems in perhaps novel ways. So I think we've got a little video that we can show you that really kind of sums up the Vertipool project. Once we've looked at that, we can come back to the bench and I can show you some of the things that we've got going on in the R&D at the moment. So let's have a look at that video now.
Across the planet, wherever there are sea defences protecting our urban coastlines, there are communities living and working in cities, towns and villages. The livelihoods of people are under threat from rising sea levels happening as a result of our increasingly warming world. As the rush to extend coastal protection gets underway, it's easy to forget the negative impact it has on the natural world. As sea levels rise against immovable hard sea walls, the rich habitat we call the intertidal zone is simply being squeezed out of existence. When the tides stop going in and out over rocky and sandy shores and instead only go up and down concrete sea defences, the crucial and important complexity of the living intertidal zone is lost forever. That is, until now. Artecology has designed, prototyped, tested and manufactured an artificial wildlife habitat unit we call Vertipool. First installed in 2013, Vertipools are now proven to provide rich, complex intertidal habitat capable of boosting both biodiversity and bioabundance on concrete, steel or wooden sea defences and other marine infrastructure. Artecology, shaping better places for people and wildlife.
So I think hopefully that video has given you a really good idea of how the vertipools work and what they look like after they've been, in the sea for some time. You saw two arrays there, the big triangular ones were the original Boldner model vertipools. So we tend to name vertipools after the first places they were trialled. So the big triangular ones are Boldner model vertipools, and then alongside those are a version of our Sandown model vertipools, the smaller ones that you saw, and they're part of an international, in fact, the study project called Marine F. And that's with Bournemouth University and several other universities as well. So there's a big array of about 40 of these smaller vertipools that have been tested over 2 years, and they've been looking for some very specific data to do with the clustering of these things. We think we've seen evidence ourselves that when you put these interventions together, when they're deployed close together, the ecological uplift you get is actually better than if you put the same number but spread further apart. And that's just sort of one of the projects that we've been working on over the last few years. We work with lots of universities, I think probably 7 or 8 so far in this journey that we've been on. So what's different about Artecology than I think almost any other eco-engineering outfit that there is in the world? There's certainly more now than there was when we were starting, but what's different about us is that we're really interested in this arts and crafts and science engineering mashup, because as makers, as we are here, we recognize that there are some traditional crafts that have a lot to give to this world, because as Elaine mentioned at the beginning, the pattern, texture and form is kind of everything in this world. That we don't want flat surfaces. That's why seawalls don't have much growing on them, because they're flat. So we're looking for pattern, texture and form, and there are a myriad of crafts that do that beautifully well. So this is a really great example. I'm going to bring this down to the camera again so that you can see. So this is just pleated paper, and this is it's not origami, it's pleating. And this is a traditional way that fabric was pleated. So you'd have two of these. This is essentially a mould. You'd lay your fabric in when it's flat, squeeze it together, it goes into a steamer, and then when you take it out and open it up, peel out the fabric, you have this wonderful, beautiful chevron, very deep texture and form, very decorative. It can be twisted, and so what we found was that just by casting directly into concrete, we can create these highly decorative, inherently bioreceptive surfaces. And that just got us thinking, okay, so how can we put that kind of pattern to use? And the first commercial use for that was this thing here, which we call an eel tile. So it's got love hearts, and it's got the chevron paper cast background. And this was used to allow eels on their migration routes up through a stream where they come to a concrete impasse that goes under a road or something like that. And we've made essentially an eel ladder, or elevator as we call it, highly decorative. There will be 1,000 love hearts. When you stand on the bridge and look down into this particular thing, there are probably 1,000 love hearts, and it grabs the attention of the person that's walking over the bridge, and that leads us to the power of using creativity and art to draw attention to the plight of wildlife. We now know that biodiversity loss is an enormous problem, and so from our point of view, we don't want to be solving these problems secretly. We want it to be designed in that these things attract people, and that the designs themselves will start to unfold that story. So let's sort of whiz back to vertiples just for a second, so that you can see some of the techniques that we. By the way, if you've got questions along the way, just drop them in that the question thing there, the text thing, and we'll try and answer them as many as we can today. But if I can't, then we'll make sure they get to me, so that I can answer by email or something like that. But so this is a Sandown model vertiple. There's that basin inside. You can see that there are overhangs here. I don't know if you can see that, but there are overhangs around here, and there's pattern and there's texture and form on the inside. And this is what makes the vertical work so well. And it's not just the inside, it's on the exterior face as well. I don't know if I can get that down there. There we go. Now, you can probably, I don't know, maybe you can guess what this texture is. It's very simple. It's just bubble wrap. It's printed bubble wrap. And we found this works fantastically well. So what we do is this drops into a mold. Let me just go back to this camera here so that you can see. So that's the shape of the thing. It's got a steel frame and armature that goes inside the basin. It fits to the seawall. When the tide goes out, this bit fills with water, but this bit is also habitable as well. And we can get, using the technique that we use, we've got two things. Look, let me reach over, here we go. There's the mould that we use for the outside. Can you see how that just fits into there? So we use a mould to get the basic shape, and then we use a plug to go in to make the basin, and then it's hands. We just get in with gloved hands, and we're able to do that because we're using a particular kind of natural cement, and it's revolutionised the way that we can do things here as hand makers, because the set time at 20 degrees is about 10 to 15 minutes. That means we have that long to make these objects. And the skill that we've developed over the 10 years is working fast with this material to allow us to, really sort of go to town on the level of detail that we can get of texture, pattern and form. Look, to show you another one now. This one's a bit heavier. So you can see the bracket configuration is slightly different. It's another Sandown version, but this one has got extraordinary complexity. The basin is actually underneath this layer here. So there's a kind of like a mesh of concrete. Now there is no way you could do that with a mould, and I'm not entirely sure you could do it with a 3D printer. Perhaps you could, but could you do it in 10 minutes? I don't know. So, we often get asked questions about, sort of working at scale. I suppose my answer to that is, how much scale do you actually need? And then surely, if we could be creating jobs to go to a bigger scale of manufacturer. We're not manufacturers. We don't really consider ourselves that. We do have some products that we sell, obviously, because all of the income that we make that comes that way goes back into R&D. It's how we carry on going. We don't get any core funding or anything like that. So,
Nigel?
Yes.
Nigel, sorry. So you've started to answer your own questions, which is fantastic. Can I start to ask you some of the questions which are coming through, which you've actually answered some of them already.
Sorry.
Yes, you do. No, it is fantastic. But there was people are interested in and why you've chosen concrete in particular, which I think you've rather than any other material. What is particularly good about using concrete, I suppose? Why that? And also anything about the specific mix? You've talked about the setting time, but is there does that affect the durability? So I think there's a couple of questions there. Why concrete? And also a little bit about the durability of these in the water, which almost, I think, answers the question, because concrete obviously provides some good durability. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose we've arrived at concrete partly because of my long history of working with cementitious materials. But there's concrete and there's concrete, isn't there? Depending on what aggregate you use, you've got a very durable material or perhaps a less durable material. So we'll quite often make a very solid object, something like the Sandown model vertical. This is very robust. It's although it's made from natural cement, the concrete that it makes is very, very strong, and it has to be because of where it's going. It's going in the firing line of sea defences. But what we may do is revisit these sometimes with what we would call a bioreceptive treatment. Now it still has cement in it, so it's a kind of concrete, but we'll change the aggregate. It really does depend on the setting and where it's going. But sometimes we may even make cement mixes that we know are not going to last, that they will turn into something else. They turn themselves back into an aggregate, and that aggregate becomes useful. These are all experiments and part of our R&D that we're doing at the moment, almost like sacrificial concrete. The question, does everything in a way nature's like forever?
That? Sorry, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So in some cases, yes, we know it has to last, for as long as we can possibly make it last. In other cases, that isn't the case. There's the sort of transformation of objects is quite interesting to us.
Yeah. And so there was a question about that natural concrete. I think people aren't necessarily familiar with that term. In this instance, what you're talking about is a cement. It's a concrete using cement that's based on clay and lime, isn't it?
That's right. So it's argillaceous limestone. It's very simple. It's one material. It's crushed and fired. It's got a lower carbon footprint because it's fired at a much lower temperature than ordinary Portland cement. It's more in line with limes and that kind of world. But it is a cement, and it's a sort of clay limestone. There are no additives, and a peculiarity of it is that it has this very quick set time. And as hand makers, that revolutionises everything for us, because it means that we've only got to have one mould instead of 50 moulds to be able to get these things out quickly. And it means that we can engage with other folks to get hands-on. I'm just going to jump forward, but look, this is made by a child. This is a biotile made by a 9-year-old child as part of a workshop that we did. And this is this will work. This object will, if you put this on a wall, it will grow mosses. It's, you know, it'll do all sorts. If you put it in the intertidal, it will populate with life.
And that's an important part of your work, isn't it, Nigel?
Allows us to do that stuff. Sorry, Elaine.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to. That's an important part of the work that you do at Artecology, isn't it? It's working with local community to evolve some of this work and to find out what's wanted and what's needed. It's that collaboration towards making better spaces, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, that is, you know, shaping better places for us isn't just a phrase; it's a delivery framework. And you know, the combination of art and science, art and engineering. You know, we talk about STEAM as opposed to STEM: science, technology, engineering, art, and maths. And the STEAM-powered nature of this makes it perfect for engaging with schools and universities and communities at large. And that is what we do. And you know, frequently now, what we're seeing from developers who are doing the work where our stuff ends up, they are bound to do some, not only stuff for nature, for biodiversity, net gain, etc., but also for community engagement. And these objects that we make, we have the ability, the know-how, and the material itself will allow for that process to legitimately go into a primary school or a high school or a university and get them hands-on with this process of think of an idea, design that idea, and make that idea a reality.
Fantastic. Listen, Nigel, that's been really interesting. I know we could be here all afternoon and you would be showing us lots of things. Unfortunately, the time has flown by and it has already gone past 1:30. So thank you very much. What I would say is that please, there is lots of other information on your website with regards to this, and please, and I'm presuming if people are free, when we send a recording out or confirmation to people, we'll include your details. You're happy to be contacted.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
And thanks again for asking me. It's really good for us.
Thank you very much. And sorry to say we've got to leave it there. I know I can listen to Nigel talk all afternoon. There'd be much more we could see. So thank you for that. And thank you everybody for tuning in. I just want to finish off by giving you some details of the next webinar, an event that we were holding, and hopefully you should be able to see that on the screen now. That is for the 24th of May at 1 o'clock as well, and we will be having Andy Coward, who is the founder of Net Zero Projects and Minimass, talking about something completely different. We're talking about automated concrete beams, 3D printed. These are low carbon 3D printed structural beams that are incredibly material efficient. And this is a new technology and design that's been patented. So please do join us for that. And thank you very much. I hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you.